How's it going? Good evening, everyone. Today is Saturday, June 20th. This is day 16 of 37 conversations. And the conversation that I wanted to have today was around a topic that a lot of people are posting about, people are, communicating about in amongst, friends and such and workplaces and everything like that, families. And it's about whether in this moment with Black Lives Matter, if silence is complicity. So, with the matters that are impacting the Black community, we've talked about them throughout this conversation series, whether it's police brutality, access to healthcare, access to education, the matters impacting the LGBTQ community, and then as it relates to Black Lives Matter, the people of color that are members of the LGBTQ community, our brothers and sisters who are in the special needs community. And again, as it relates to this, the lens with people of color and such, there's the question of is silence complicity? So if someone doesn't speak out on it, if they're not posting about it, if they aren't talking about it in workplaces, in that regard, are they complicit in, the matter that's taking place in the matter at hand right now? This might be in contrast or opposition to people, some other people that are part of the movement in general, or even people who are, advocates and activists, as I consider myself to be as well for this movement as well. On its face, I don't think that silence is complicity. I really don't, because people are in different lanes. You know what I mean? There are people who are on the fringes of this movement who are learning more about the Black Lives Matter movement. This is the teachable moment for all of us, but more importantly, our white counterparts, and even those that, don't, share that true Black experience as it is in the United States. So on its face, I don't think that silence is complicity, but there is some nuance there, in my opinion. I think as it relates to other aspects of the Black experience, other aspects of Black Lives Matter, and maybe I should dive a little bit more as I think about that a little bit. Maybe I should dive a little deeper into what my thoughts are about it. But going to this point I wanted to make real quick, though, as it relates to other aspects relating to Black Lives Matter, like, the marginalization that Black people and people of color experience in the workplace, whether it's hiring practices, whether it's the pay scale that exists in a corporation or a nonprofit or federal agency or statewide agency or whatever, local government or something like that. Whether it's where's something else, practices relating to how people are, received or regarded at work. And I think that, and just even beyond the professional environment, but I believe that if you are quiet in that sense, and there's, you're in a position to effectuate, how people are paid, how people are hired, what the statements are relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In that sense, if someone is silent, I think they are complicit in that sense. But even if you're in a position of influence, you don't have to have a leadership position to be a leader, right? You can lead from which the seat that you're in. So I think that, in some of those aspects of the Black experience, certainly silence is complicity. If you're if you're a city council person or a local government person that was in Flint, Michigan, that was aware of the issues impacting the unhealthy water that was there, right? That was being provided to that community, and they did nothing about it. Yeah, sure, certainly, you're complicit in that sense. As it relates to the aspect of police brutality, however, I don't know that. Personally, and this is definitely one of the Q&A conversations I'm going to have. I'm going to be trying to pay more attention to the comments if there are any, and if there's questions or thoughts or whatever that you want me to react to, please put like CJ and then whatever your statement is, and I'll try to catch that. So at any rate, yeah. So I think that in that respect, as it relates to police brutality, obviously there's not a direct causation between being silent and being complicit in the fact that, unarmed person is being, killed by the police, or, someone is being racially profiled and, being attacked, or something like Ahmaud Arbery was, or something like that. So on its face, silence isn't complicity, in my opinion. But I can dive into that a little bit more and provide some personal perspective on, this other point that's being made, right now is, that white silence equals violence. I think there are hot takes that sometimes people make, right? There are words that people throw out, phrases that people throw out. I don't know that I would really, say that white silence equals violence. Maybe, that's not wrong, but is it right to say? I don't know. I really don't know. But I will explain. I understand where the people that feel that way are coming from, but I'll explain it like this. Silence on these matters, especially as it relates to police brutality, as it relates to the marginalization of people of color in this country, is not okay. Silence is not okay. And it does result in further marginalization. It does result in further issues with police brutality. First and foremost, white people are the majority population in this country. First and foremost. So that being said, and as we've talked about in previous conversations, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to have, sustainable, significant social change without policy implications, which requires us to vote, which requires us to have communication with our legislators so they understand how the decisions and choices that they make impact us and the way that we live our lives. So in the event, as it relates to this police brutality moment, certainly, being quiet on that matter doesn't help the matter, because it's just maintaining the status quo. And the status quo, obviously, as I think most people I would hope, agree to, is not satisfactory. And that's probably a nice way of saying it. So in the event, as it relates to, being silent on these matters, regarding marginalization, regarding police brutality, regarding, systemic racism and such, being silent on those matters is going to just perpetuate what's happening now. I think that we've also identified, what we're ultimately talking about when you boil this matter down and you get to the bare bones of it. It's racism. It's racism. And, not being racist is not good enough. We've talked about this in previous conversations already. I'm sure we'll talk about that throughout the rest of the series. Not being racist isn't good enough. We have to be anti-racism. And being anti-racism, requires us to do some of the things that we talked about, I think, in the conversation I had maybe 2 nights ago. Last night was Juneteenth. The night before that is when I talked about some of these measures. It has to deal with, voting, right? If you believe in being anti-racist, you supporting candidates who are running on a platform or support a platform, or who are already in, their elected positions and have advanced platforms that benefit all people, including marginalized people and communities of color. So that's being anti-racist. That's how you act on that. Elevating people's voices, amplifying people's voices. People of color have been, complaining and voicing, protesting, having their voices be heard, writing their congressmen about some of these issues that are impacting the black community and people of color and black and brown community, for generations. And the needle hasn't moved there. And what's another way that you can, just show your anti protesting? You can protest, allowing your voice to be heard on the street, be in mass, standing in solidarity with the black and brown community in this Black Lives Matter movement. And there are others, and there are others, and there are others. So, while I don't believe necessarily that silence is complicity, I do believe that being silent on these issues, on these matters, are going to maintain the status quo, which keeps things the way that they are right now. And I think that many people, especially those who are about the Black Lives Matter movement, are in agreement with that. They agree with that. I mean, we can't maintain where we are right now. We can't maintain the way that law enforcement polices communities of color. We have to build coalitions there. We have to build bridges. We have to invest in convenings and bringing community leaders and citizens of communities and law enforcement together to identify, listen, you're here to protect us. Listen, you're here to be a law-abiding citizen, and so on and so forth in that regard. We have to be able to, really amplify the voices of those being impacted in communities where their schools aren't good. Where they may live in failing schools. There are districts in this country, and there are places in this country, as my brother related to during our conversation about 37 films about the Black experience, where he spoke about and this is obviously a point that I'm aware of as well, where there are some places where local schools get money that's commensurate with the property taxes surrounding that school, which ultimately, in other words, means that if it's a poor part of town, then, that school's going to get, less money. Or you could be in the exact same city or same exact zip code or whatever, but in a better part of town, a more affluent part of town, and that school is getting more money because it's commensurate with the property taxes. So, being able to, deconstruct some of that systemic racism, being able to, speak out about systemic racism, educating yourself, educating others on this matter. I think that's also other ways to really show the anti-racism effort, if that makes sense. So, I think that I get worried. I get worried when I see posts and I see people using language like silence is complicity, or, using language like, white silence equals violence. I understand this is a moment in which people do need to be uncomfortable, and they need to feel that disruption. There's a great quote that I love that says, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. So I understand this is a moment for that. People who are privileged in privileged positions, people who are not understanding of the Black Lives Matter movement and the Black Lives and brown and Black life experience in this country, they most certainly need to be uncomfortable. But I think there are ways in which you do that, right? One of the great things I've learned from a leader that I served under, that I served with many years ago, is she told me that you have to create cultural shifts and change in a manner in which people can digest them. So, if we're on the defensive, and it's very easy to be defensive, it's very easy to be defensive about this matter because, the matters and the issues that have been impacting, communities of color in this country have been prevalent for generations. So it's very easy to be, and people haven't been listening. So it's very easy to be defensive about it. But I think when we're trying to build coalitions and we really need people to be in solidarity with us, attacking, and that's my personal perspective, coming at someone by saying, your silence is complicity, when they could just be simply trying to understand and educate themselves on this matter, or asking questions to be able to, be objective and say, hey, listen, how can I join this fight with you, could push some people away. By saying white silence equals violence, on the same token, that might be something that's in someone's face that they need to hear, that might actually, be a call to action. But for some, also, I feel that it could potentially be detrimental as well. But, it's important to communicate in whatever best way people know. So, whereas I may not use those words, some other people will. But that's what this is about. This is about the conversation. This is about, dialogue. This is about, speaking with people who don't look like you and talking about these exact same things. I'm not the voice, obviously for everybody. So I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Karina. She was mentioning that silence is not equal in inaction. Not finding other ways to support or doing nothing at all is siding with the oppressor. So of course, exactly, I agree with that. So I think that there are ways in which that you can be brought along, right? And this is a moment, there are so many different lanes. And we've talked about this the other night during the white privilege conversation: voting, protesting, writing your congressman, being a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are your hiring practices like at your job? What are your pay scales like at your job for all people, especially marginalized populations? Women, people of color, LGBTQ, people in the special needs community, and so on. So there are ways in which we can, jump into this fight. And also, again, I can't stress anymore, but not forget about the intersectional aspects that are relating to this Black Lives Matter moment as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure that, I think I've made that point pretty strongly. I think that, why I totally understand fellow activists and, fellow people and those who are passionate about the Black Lives Matter movement saying, silence is complicity. I don't think on its face that it is, because, there are many people out there, I believe, in taking that Anne Frank role, right? Thinking that, or that Anne Frank line of thinking that, all people are good at heart. I think that about most people. I don't know that, I can say that I think that about everybody. I mean, I've seen and heard and, observed people doing some pretty bad things, right? Excuse me. But I think most, because we have not talked about race in this country enough, because we have not educated people in this country enough, there is a reality to what I'm about to say right here when I say that you don't know what you don't know. There is a reality to that a little bit. I'm not going to give anyone a complete pass on not knowing what they don't know, about not knowing about what it's like to be oppressed or marginalized or systemic racism, because it's very prevalent in our communities as it relates to the media and as it relates to data and research that's out there. I mean, election cycles talk about these things. When, people are being killed on the news and so on, and their murders are being shown on the news, they're being killed by police or whatever the case may be, or by community members. Like, some of those things are, we're all living some of this together. It's impacting some more than others, obviously, but, but there is a example. I mean, there is validity to, someone that says, like, you don't know what you don't know, just like, last night, yesterday was Juneteenth. Hope everyone had a great Juneteenth. And, I saw a lot of different posts online and conversations online where people were saying, like, I had never heard about Juneteenth until today, so there is some credibility to that. I don't know that it's up to us to assume that people are completely aware, right? And thus potentially alienating them, or because we need everyone in solidarity with the movement, or potentially outcasting them or whatever by saying that your silence is complicity, when simply they may not, because they haven't experienced that, or they haven't had those conversations with people of color, or maybe they lack empathy in that moment. Someone can lack empathy, but they can find it. I think they can certainly, hone those skills, right? Those social skills of empathy. So I think that, we have to be, and unfortunately, I mean, it's ironic, right? We're in a position of being marginalized, but then also have to find ourselves being delicate in the way that we talk about our marginalization. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, we can't just paint everyone with the same brush, because we don't want anyone painting us all, with the same brush in the Black and brown community. So, yeah, I know I said a lot. I'm not sure. I'm not seeing too many comments or questions or anything like that. But, yeah, I that's where I'm at with the whole is silence complicity conversation for this evening. Keep coming back, keep sharing. People have been, again, dropping comments in my direct messages about, the 37 Conversation series. People have been commenting on the post when I post into Instagram, and also on YouTube. Again, this is on YouTube. I'm a couple episodes behind on uploading, but they can be found under 37 Conversations About Race on YouTube. Some of our, friends and family don't have Instagram, like my father doesn't. So if, you find these conversations are useful or helpful for those around you, feel free to go grab it from YouTube and, get that particular conversation or whatever and share it with them in that manner. And let me know. I mean, a lot of people have been sharing ideas for future conversations. This is day 16. So there's 21 more that I'm going to have. And I look forward to connecting with you all some more. So hope you have a great Saturday evening, and I will talk to you tomorrow.